fighting a 7-front war is probably the most difficult military task any country can undertake. Just on the merits of the military task alone, it is going to press any state to the brink of their capacity, whether that's politically, diplomatically, economically, and certainly militarily. But when you add in some dangerous ideological intents, and you're looking through the lens of what you want to be true, then it gets from difficult to dangerous. Dangerous for the state itself and dangerous for its allies. Also dangerous for those in the region. And of course, we're talking about the Israeli wars right now, where they are fighting by their own counting on 7 different fronts. That is the Hamas in Gaza Strip, the West Bank, against Yemen in Syria, against Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen, against militants in Iraq and in Syria, and of course the Iranians. That's already started, and we're, of course, as we keep telling you, we're waiting to find out what Israel's next move is going to be, because that could completely send it into a new level. They just explode beyond compare to anything that's happened thus far. It could get a whole lot worse, but it's pretty bad right now. When you, of course, add in the last one, Lebanon, that I'm missing here. Now, it's important to understand that what the objectives are of the Israeli side. Now, all of this started on 7 October of last year, this current war. Now, obviously, the situation didn't start on 7 October of 2023. It literally goes back through decades and numerous wars that have been fought, and a lot of things that have been happening, especially in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. Those things have been simmering for quite a long time. But this current phase started on 7 October. Now, many people think, well, as soon as Israel rectifies what happened on 7 October, everything's going to be fine. But I'm about to show you that that's not the case, because Israel has much bigger designs and much bigger appetites than just returning to the status quo ante prior to 7 October of last year. And then you're going to see that the Americans are either feckless and powerless to do anything about it, unwilling to acknowledge what is self-evidently true. And then some Americans are outright trying to facilitate it and to make it palatable for Western ears. All of this is not just a bad idea. It's not just irrational and immoral. It's outright dangerous, even for our own interest, because the things that are being pursued here are unattainable. The military forces and the resources that all of when you're talking about Israel, the United States, UK, all the people who are trying to help Israel right now, when you put all that together, it is insufficient to accomplish what they're trying to do. And what they're trying to do is directly counter to what at least used to be American values and morals. We should not be supporting something, no matter how friendly we are with someone, if it's immoral. And if it contradicts and cuts the knees out of our own values, because that's not what America is supposed to stand for. It's not rational to do that. And if there are those that is an accurate representation of our values, then that's a separate issue that also needs to be addressed. But first things first, let's take a look first of all at one of the more firebrands in the Israeli government. It's important to note this is a member of the Israeli government. Gary, if you can throw up that Middle East eye full screen I sent you. I didn't even ask for it. Hope you've still got it handy. To where Ben Smotrich went on a TV program a day or two ago and said, "Hey, you know what? We have more in mind than just driving Hamas out of the Gaza Strip. We have bigger goals in mind." And in fact, let me just go show you a segment of this, because you're going to see that he has additional territorial ambitions. Watch this.
אני רוצה מדינה יהודית.
שזה אומר מה?
מדינה יהודית. זה נורא נורא מורכב. זו מדינה שמתנהגת לפי עולם הערכים של העם היהודי.
הריבונות של ישראל מתחילה בים ונגמרת בנהר. בשלב הזה, או שבעצם אנחנו גם מוצאים את עבר הירדן, בשלב הבא?
בסדר, לאט לאט. כתוב בחז"ל שעתידה ישראל, עתידה ירושלים להתרחב עד דמשק.
זאת אומרת, אנחנו...
רק ירושלים, עד דמשק.
Yeah, that's the one there. So you see that's gotten some interest, but here's the problem with that. That's the Middle East Eye. That's a regional English news site in the Middle East. I haven't seen anything about this on Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, Dallas Morning News, nothing in America. I haven't seen it. Maybe it's out there somewhere, but I did a search for it before we started the show, and I can't find it anywhere. Would you have, this is not just somebody giving it a personal opinion in Israel, not just an influencer or something like that. This is a member of the cabinet of the Israeli government openly declaring that he has additional countries involved. Now, what do you think that the governments in Jordan or in Syria are going to do about this? Are they just going to say, roll their eyes and say, oh, there's that Smotrich again, that hothead? Again, he's part of the government. And it's not just the government, and this is also not anything new. Now, this is from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, from last January, talking about how there is nothing on the state of Israel, to include the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, that he doesn't want possession over. Watch this.
In the future, the state of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea. This is what happens when you have sovereignty. This truth I say to our American friends. And I also stopped the attempt to impose us a reality that will jeopardize us. A prime minister in Israel has to be able to say no, even to the best of friends.
So what he's saying there, very unequivocally and consistently, that's one soundbite I pulled out there. I could certainly pull out many others, both before that and after, and since that time, to include just as recently as a few days ago, where Netanyahu said and gave a direct threat to the people of Lebanon that either you do what we want and turn over all of the tens of thousands of Hamas fighters, or you're going to be turned into Gaza. Straight up, that's what he said. He threatened them in that way. And he said, oh, I want you to have a good future. And all you have to do to have this good future is to surrender and to become docile and to do what we say. And then everything will be fine. So you see that there are a lot of territorial ambitions. And of course, if you're going to go into Jordan and into Syria, that means you have to have all or parts of Lebanon as well. And when Israel's going on into Lebanon, as it started now in its latest addition to its multi-front war, the question has to be, and it's not been thoroughly answered yet, do you intend to leave? Are you going to occupy it, or are you going to take it and seize it? We don't know, but there is some evidence to suggest that there are some in Israel that are thinking about that very thing, that this would be some good land to expand into. And when you're moving so much military force, there's, last I heard, there were still 4 combat divisions, 4 Israeli divisions that are currently fighting in southern Lebanon. Now, that's not just some incursion. That's not just a raid. That is a full-on invasion of another country. That's a fact. And Israel's already starting to suffer a lot of casualties. I'm not going to talk about that part of it today, but we're going to go into the bigger issues of what are the objectives and what is the Americans going to do. So now I just mentioned to you that 2 days ago, Netanyahu made that statement to the people of Lebanon to basically surrender and lay down or be destroyed. And in a State Department briefing, I think it was the next day, Matt Miller was asked in a really uncomfortable exchange by a reporter where he's going to ask him about what Netanyahu said there. Note how awkward Miller tries to dance around the issue, and how at the end of it, he basically says, yeah, whatever he said.
You said earlier that Israel has a right to attack Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. I wanted to ask if you had seen the Israeli Prime Minister's video that he put out in English to the people of Lebanon last night. He had a couple lines in there. He said, "You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza. I say to you, the people of Lebanon, free your country from Hezbollah so that this war can end." That seems like a blanket threat against the civilian population. Is that terrorism?
So, first of all, let me say we cannot and must not see the situation in Lebanon turn into anything like the situation in Gaza. That would, of course, not be acceptable. And ultimately, it is as I said in response to an earlier question, it is up to the Lebanese people, not anybody else, to decide on who their government is. I said in response to another question, no country in the region should dictate to the Lebanese people who their leaders are. Not Israel, not the United States, not any of the other countries in the region, and that should continue.
But Israel is dictating
to
that.
be the case. No, they're conducting operations going after a terrorist organization. That's a different thing than dictating what the civilian government should be. That's a question for the Lebanese people to decide. So,
But if they decide against Israel's wishes, Israel is threatening Gaza-like annihilation of the people of Lebanon.
and I'm making very clear that there should be no kind of military action in Lebanon that looks anything like Gaza and leaves a result anything like Gaza.
Yeah, that last part was the worst, where, again, directly called out. At least they give that reporter credibility and credence, because he wouldn't let it go. He just said, no, they're talking about and are doing wiping out, all the civilian infrastructure in there. Gary showed you a lot of those B-roll a lot of times where you just see extraordinary heavy toll, like the one there from the Washington Post, on civilians and just being wiped out. You see these massive explosions going on there. And then you have Matt Miller just again reiterating what he'd said before, that, well, that can happen. We have to prevent that from happening, but you won't take any action to do it. Zero, none whatsoever. Israel continues on to just have this massive bombings and destruction in Gaza and in the West Bank and now in Lebanon, throughout the country, not just in Beirut. And we are completely powerless to do it, to do anything to even moderate it, much less to stop it. We have the flexibility, we have the power, we just choose not to employ any of it. And then there are those like former CIA director, former General David Petraeus, who seem intent on wanting to justify it. And there was a kind of an extended comment or interview, rather, I believe it was with a Canadian outfit, where Petraeus is going to basically try and, using his experience and what he claims happened in Iraq and in the past under his command, to say that, hey, no, this makes a lot of sense what they're doing, and we got to support that. Now, to an American audience, when they hear David Petraeus and when they hear, former CIA director, former four-star general in charge of the famous Iraqi surge that helped to quell the violence there, most people think that, well, he's a really good guy. He's a smart guy. He's an American. He's a patriot. If he says this, it must be true. Well, I was in Iraq and I was in Afghanistan, and in Afghanistan specifically during his time in command. So I know for a fact what happened on the ground there, and I know what happened in Iraq. And I've covered this in a lot of things that I've written in the past. But I want to show you, and I'm going to break it into a few pieces here because it's too much to cover in just one long soundbite. Just how inaccurate and just flat wrong he is on these things. And when you see that, you see that the justification that he's trying to give you is ridiculous. It cannot be succeeded. It's not going to succeed for very practical reasons, which I want to get into now. So let's start off, first of all, with the first portion of his comment there about Israel's vision for the future of Gaza.
By the way, Arab countries aren't going to go in there. Americans aren't going to, unless Israel provides this vision for the future of Gaza, which should be one that provides a better future for the Palestinian people there, with Hamas out of their midst, and can only be achieved, in my view, by Israel securing, essentially reoccupying Gaza, but without any kind of settlements and the rest of that, and with a clear plan of transition to trained and equipped Palestinian forces that are reliable, probably trained and equipped at the Jordanian International Police Training Center by Americans. That's the only viable alternative that can ensure that Hamas is never part of the governance structure, and that, by the way, Hamas is truly destroyed. Destruction means that the enemy cannot even reconstitute. And what Israel is doing right now in Gaza.
That's good. Thanks, Gary. A few things I want to say about that first part there. Let's interpret for you. So he says, first of all, Israel's vision for a better future for the Palestinians. Have you not been listening to anything? Benjamin Netanyahu and his government do not want a better future for the Palestinians. They want them out. And listen, the Israeli Defense Forces are systematically wiping out every possibility for the Gaza Strip to sustain life. They're no longer just, quote, going after the terrorist. I mean, if it wasn't evident in the first few months of the war, it certainly should be now that Israel has once again restarted from the north and is moving south from Gaza City itself and moving south. And there are a lot of reports. We showed you a bit the other day, I think, of Trey Yingst of Fox News, who said that the place is just being systematically destroyed. He just said their entire neighborhoods are being wiped out so that they cannot sustain life. And this is from a network that has historically been saying all these good things about Israel and basically saying everything they're doing is fine. Now, even he is saying that they are killing reporters. Israel is killing reporters. Anybody on the ground there, Gaza reporters from the Palestinian side are being targeted and killed. He straight up said that, and he stands with the reporters. He said they should be free to do their job there. And he showed with his camera that he went in there. He had access to it. Yeah, that's some of it right there. Pardon me. And you see this. This is not just going after terrorists. This is destroying everything that you can see inside there so that no life can be fixed. So now when you stand there and you want to tell the American people, David Petraeus, that Israel has a plan for a future and a hope for a prosperous Palestine, that is self-evidently a lie. Now, let me not say that. It's self-evidently untrue. Now, whether Petraeus believes it or not, I don't know, because that's possible. He actually believes what he's saying, which is incredible that anyone could look at those images and thousands of others throughout the Gaza Strip, all the way down to the Rafah Gate in the south. And it's that same kind of thing just is over and over and over. So the Israelis don't have any interest in a prosperous Palestine. They want them out. And by making it unable to sustain life, it is very clear from the evidence, the physical evidence, that their intent is to make them have to go somewhere else, to get them out. So there is no intent on doing that. The next thing he says, which is ridiculous too, is he said there has to be a trained Palestinian force. Now, let me break that down to you because it may not seem self-evident. He said that this force should be trained by Americans in Jordan at this training center. Now let's take a look at this from the people of Palestine for a second. So let's, for the moment, say that the war has come to some kind of conclusion, whatever it may be. It's not important. But at that point, he's saying that there needs to be an American-directed, American-trained force that is going to now govern the Gaza Strip. So that means that does he really believe that the Palestinian people, after all of that stuff has happened, after all this destruction, the deaths of tens of thousands of people, thousands of children, that they're now going to just say, okay, we're going to passively accept whoever you give to us, because you know that force would only be approved by the Israeli government. American trained, Israeli approved, period. There's no independence of anything. And that first of all, you're going to find a bunch of Palestinians who will lord it over their people on behalf of the United States and Israel. I mean, that is absurd to the extreme. I guarantee you, if you talk to any of the Palestinian people, they say if we're going to be governed, it's going to be by our choice. We're going to decide who's going to govern us, and we're going to decide who's going to provide security, and it's going to be somebody on our side. It's going to be somebody who's going to defend us against any kind of aggression, i.e., what the Israelis are doing and the Americans are supporting. So that is a complete impossibility that's ever going to happen. It's not going to. There's no chance that that's ever going to work. Then he says also that the Hamas must be physically destroyed. And as I've been telling you from the beginning, and it's now just massively playing out in front of our eyes, you can't destroy Hamas because Hamas ultimately is an idea. It's not a physical entity. And there are a lot of people who are fighting in the name of Hamas, have been from the beginning, and tens of thousands of those have probably been killed as well. But because of that one-time massive destruction you see, because of this article in the New York Times I showed you from a couple of days ago, where 65 medical professionals have validated that they see throughout the entire Gaza Strip children have been assassinated with bullet wounds to the head and the chest, like an actual sniper going after kids. Okay, that, believe me, that's just in the New York Times so that we can see some of it now. But I assure you, in the strongest terms, people in the Gaza Strip are well aware of this. And that news spreads like wildfire throughout. So you are going to create, every single time any one of those kids going in, practically the entire male population, and probably many of the females as well. Why do they ever want to work with an entity that is literally mowing down children? And again, this is not rumors, folks. This is evidence provided by the Western people, not Hamas, Western people who have tried to help these people to survive. They have no incentive and motive to make this up. These are people that are saying this is evident, and they provided X-ray evidence of what they were talking about, not just taking their word for it. Now, what do you think is going to destroy Hamas? So I think the number they used at the beginning was about 30,000 Hamas fighters. Do you think it's even possible to eliminate all 30,000 of those if there was like some roster somewhere, and that at the end of the day there won't be 50,000, 60,000, 200,000 ready to take their place against Israel? Put yourself in their shoes. Would you be willing, if some foreign entity came into your country and into your city and town and just mowed down anyone who had gotten their way, wiped out your infrastructure, and then said, now I want you to accept my approved security force, police force of your people to do my will? Are you going to be okay with that? If the existing police force in your town were all killed, every one of them, would you have any interest in being at peace with the offending party? Would you be willing to just say, yeah, come and kill our own people and we're going to do whatever you say? Nobody would do that. All you're going to do is create more opposition. It's just self-evident. That's just the way humanity is. It doesn't even matter what country you're talking about, what people, what culture, what race, what time. This is just a universal human issue. You cannot kill a bunch of people and then tell them to be passive about it. So that objective to destroy Hamas has not been accomplished. It will never be accomplished. Ergo, Israel will never have peace unless it either radically changes its policy and actually does provide a path to a future and a hope for a peaceful and a free Palestine, so that they can have any kind of semblance of freedom, or they will have to physically remove everyone one way or the other. Those are the only two paths. There is no path where you just maintain the status quo, kill everybody, and still have some hope that it's going to turn into peace. It won't. It won't. So to go down that path, to listen to David Petraeus, to listen to the Israeli government, is to guarantee continued war, open-ended. One of those two things has to happen. And God help us if it's the other one, to where they physically remove everyone from the Gaza Strip, because now then you've got a catastrophe of historic proportions that can never be accomplished, and is definitely violates grotesquely what used to be American values. All right, let's, Gary, if you can bring that clip back up, let's move to the next section here, where he's going to talk about you can't just clear and leave. He's going to talk some military terms here. You have to clear, hold, and build. And this is from his time in Iraq.
Destruction means that the enemy cannot even reconstitute. And what Israel is doing right now in Gaza, having dramatically degraded Hamas and now controlling the southern border between Gaza and the Sinai, Egypt, which prevents the reuse of the tunnels underneath that area to provide arms, ammunition, explosives, and other material for Gaza, as has been the case in the past. Still, you have to prevent Hamas from reconstituting. And then the clear and leave operations that they're conducting, akin to what we were doing in Iraq in 2006, prior to the surge, do not prevent reconstitution. In fact, they leave a vacuum, and the vacuum is generally being filled by sizable remnants of Hamas, nowhere near the organization they were before, criminal elements, and then some remnants of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The only way to truly destroy them is by securing the area sequentially, series of walls and gated communities, as we described it when we did Fallujah, Ramadi, Bakuba, and these others. And we produced a better future for the Iraqi people. by getting Al-Qaeda and the Sunni insurgents out of their neighborhoods and then keeping them out until it was very clear to the people that they should not ever want them back in, and they should support what it was we were trying to do, and then would hand off to the Iraqi government over time.
All right, that's a good spot there, Gary. So he claims in there two major things. Number one, he claims that segmenting the population in Iraq created a better future for the Iraqi people once they got Al-Qaeda out, once they got the Sunni insurgents out. That is absolutely false. That is not what happened in Iraq in 2007. This famous surge that Petraeus always gets this credit for. I've written on this extensively, where Petraeus claims that his plan, and he came and said it's a plan of new ideas and new thoughts, and we're showing that the Iraqi people that there's a better way and that their future lies not with this old tired resistance group, but with us in the future, because that's where the future lies, and they're hoping. We finally got them to see that. They turned against the insurgents, and that's what caused the thing to succeed. That's the narrative that he has been selling ad nauseum ever since 2007. Problem is, it's physically, graphically untrue. That is not what happened in Iraq. And just real briefly, I don't want to get into a whole different story here, but in 2007, and I have interviewed the U.S. brigade commander who was in charge of the area where this took place, so I have firsthand knowledge from the guy who was in charge of it, what happened. And that is that he was fighting in this area where some of the fighting was the most intense, that the anti-U.S. Fighters were going against the insurgents, the Sunni insurgents primarily. And he said that they were fighting the Sunni insurgents, but they were also fighting against the Al-Qaeda in Iraq, an Al-Qaeda affiliate that was fighting in there. So we were fighting against two of those different ones. Well, here's the problem. The Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the insurgency in Iraq were both Sunni primarily. So they should have been natural allies against us. But because the Al-Qaeda in Iraq was an internationalist focus, and the insurgency was a nationalist focus, you have international and national. Well, these guys wanted to have a region-wide and then a global jihadi kind of situation against Western imperialism, et cetera. But the Iraqi insurgency, they just wanted their country back, and they didn't want to do that. So instead of just disagreeing, the Al-Qaeda tried to impose it on them, and they literally started killing their Sunni allies in the country. Well, the Sunni insurgency was being fought now not just by the Americans and the Shia in Iraq, who was then the government, because they were also going against them, and then now Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And they said, this is existential. We won't survive this because we can't have three enemies in one time. So one of their sheiks approached the Americans and said, hey, what if we help you fight Al-Qaeda? Enemy of my enemy is my friend. What if we say, hey, we'll show you where they are. We'll even help you fight them. You get rid of Al-Qaeda. That's your biggest enemy. And so we said, sure, works for us. And so they started doing that. And then this guy did. He mobilized the sheik, mobilized his Sunni allies, and they started going against Al-Qaeda with our help. We were able to help them with firepower, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, Petraeus, who had been sent there with a surge, said, hey, that looks like a good idea. Let's encourage that. Let's support that and fund it. So he gets credit for recognizing what was going on there. And so now overnight, all of a sudden, all of these Sunni insurgents who were fighting the U.S. turn around and fight with the U.S. against these guys, against the Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So the brigade commander told me during my interview that if it had not been for that, and this was in, I think, 2010, 2011, so 4 or 5 years later, he said we'd still be fighting there to this day, because he said we were basically just mowing the grass. We would go in and do our operations. They would come right back in right after that. And ideologically, they wanted us out. So it was a resistance to our occupation. Key point there. But the only reason they turned against us was because there was a common enemy in Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Had Al-Qaeda in Iraq actually allied with the Sunni insurgency, it would have even been worse. And I don't think we would have ever been able to militarily win that conflict. But Petraeus, while he did the right thing on the ground there for America, because it certainly lowered our casualty rate, radically, and allowed us to withdraw there in 2011. But instead of it saying what actually happened, he changed it to actually say, no, it was our idea, and we got them to see that their future life. There was no truth to that. Now that's what he's saying here. And you have the similar dynamic to more like what happened in Afghanistan, because there was no other entity there. So the Taliban didn't have anybody to want our help to get rid of. So this resistance group to our occupation, you're seeing a similar theme here. They never turned with us. They always stayed against us. And then we know the result. In 2021, we left in shame and humiliation. And to this day, the Taliban are in power. That's the truth. That's what actually happened. So when you hear this guy now saying, take this template of what we did in Iraq in 2007 and apply it in the Gaza Strip, that's nonsense, because that's not what actually happened then. What you try that here, you're going to get what happened when Petraeus tried to replicate it in Afghanistan in 2010, where I was under his command and saw firsthand with my own eyes exactly what happened on the ground. And that's why I say that almost certainly that's going to happen here. The people in Palestine have no motive, no incentive to ever turn against Hamas when Israel is killing them by the thousands. I mean, just think how irrational what he's saying is. And yet with a straight face, he says, yeah, this is what we should do. And then he also says that, let's see, what was it? He said, we agree he wants them to become basically docile. He says, yeah, to destroy Hamas, all we have to do is segregate the city, cut it into sections here. Yeah, I mean, that's going to make any population really happy. So they've been prisoners in the Gaza Strip, which is, I don't even know for sure how long it is, 25 kilometers wide, I think it is, in some period of also long, but it's been hermetically sealed from the sea on one side and with a gate on the other three sides. Now you want to say, let's cut it in even smaller pieces so that they can't even move around at all. And that's going to help a lot. And he said, and then they'll see that they have a future and a hope. I mean, that's it. What is he talking about? That's like saying you're in a prison and now we're going to put people in smaller cells and hem them off from anyone else, and that's going to make them happy. I mean, it's irrational more than I can even say. But that's the standard data today. That's the fare for so-called American elite trying to convince you. Listen to me, because I was the CIA director. I was a 4-star general. I was the hero of Iraq in 2007. Listen to me, because I know what I'm talking about. He's either lying, remarkably self-deluded, or I don't know. He's so twisted that he believes he's saying. Don't know what it is, but I can tell you for a fact that what he's saying is dead flat wrong. Now, one last section here I want to talk about from his interview here. He's going to be talking here about who's going to govern in a post-war Hamas. Watch this.
Arab countries aren't going to go in there. Americans aren't going to go in there. NGOs can't really do that much in there unless you have security, in which case everything is possible. You can also bring in contractors to thicken the whole effort. But again, none of that is possible without security. And I don't see an alternative to this, knowing that Israel doesn't want to reoccupy, the U.S. doesn't want them to reoccupy. But again, if you don't do clear hold and build, you're not going to provide a better future for the Palestinian people over a period of time, probably a long period, remove the incentive and inclination to support groups like Hamas, and show that Palestinians and Israeli Jews can live side by side in harmony.
Oh, man. Live side by side in harmony. All you got to do is what I said, 1, 2, 3 steps, and bam, peace and harmony. By taking away the incentives, he says, for the Palestinian people to support the likes of Hamas. But does he not have any idea? Is he truly this clueless to not understand that all of this is resistance to what Israel has been doing since the outset, since 1948, and all the way through with these multiple intifadas and these periodic uprisings, because they are trapped in this area. They're trapped in the West Bank for a large extent. They actually are segmented off there. It's a terrible situation when you look at what's actually going on the ground there. The only way anyone lives in harmony is if they get a chance to have some freedom. This two-state solution, which we keep saying with our mouth over and over, is the objective here. This is what we want to do. That's the only thing that has any hope. And listen, I know the likes of Smotrich, of Ben-Gvir, certainly of Netanyahu, they want to own it all. They don't want to share it. They don't want to have any two-state solution. They want one-state solution, free of Arabs. That's their objective. And until or unless they ever change that, there will never be peace and harmony between Jews and Arabs, especially in the territory, in the areas around Israel. That's just a fact. And it's not hard to figure out. You don't need a PhD in Middle Eastern policies and history and any of that stuff. It's just human nature. It's self-evident. If you continually harass and imprison, beat, and kill people like the IDF has been doing for so many years, they're never going to live in harmony. Because what for that vision that Petraeus just talked about in that last segment there, for that to become true, the people of Palestine must either be physically removed, as I said before, or they have to become absolutely passive and just saying, yes, we're going to agree to be abused for the rest of our lives. We'll just slump our shoulders and bow our heads and just live in jail for the rest of our lives with no freedom, no hope, no possibility of anything other than abject subservience. But see, here's the problem with even that weird vision, which I think has virtually no chance of success. Human nature and human history going back thousands of years, I can't think of a time when that succeeded. The problem with it is that I don't think Israel would accept it, because I think that the only outcome they want is what Smotrich said, what Netanyahu said. They want to drive all of the Arabs out and possess even larger land. So even if the Palestinians magically did what nobody else has ever done before and becomes a willing, passive population that says, sure, we'll just do whatever you say, I don't think Israel would accept that, because that's not what they want. And they are using people like David Petraeus and many others in the United States that have great credibility and reputation to support this, to make you think, American audience especially, Western audience in general, that, hey, this makes sense. There's a good chance that this works out. And then, of course, when it doesn't, they'll just say, well, we tried. We were doing everything we could, because many Israelis, especially their leaders, use some language that makes it sound like they're trying, and we want to cease fire, and we want to have an end to this, etc. You saw like Netanyahu's comment there to the Lebanese people, I want you to have a future and a hope in this beautiful country, whatever. He said the same thing to the people of Iran. All these beautiful words for Western ears to make him sound reasonable, when the evidence and the actions show he has no intention to do any of those things. He wants to do what he said there in January and what Smotrich said a couple of days ago. That's just the truth of it, folks. And now you know the truth. So next time you hear people saying these kinds of things, just make sure you understand the truth behind them, because that's all we can do at this point. But we're not going to sit passively by and let these lies and these gross mischaracterizations go unchallenged. You can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive for that. And in fact, speaking of the truth, here in just, let's see, about 20 minutes, we're going to have Ted Postal back, and he's going to set the record straight on what Iran's missiles actually did. We had him on a week or so ago after the 180 missile barrage from Iran against Israel in retaliation for the assassination of Hani, etc. And he showed a lot of what actually happened. He had a lot of maps and graphics. And we had a lot of comments in the comment section of that, where people were asking some questions, and they were making some challenges. They saying, hey, this doesn't look right. So Ted, being the great guy that he is, has said he is willing to come back on today and answer a lot of that, because folks, when you make comments, we actually read them. We do care what you say. This is an interactive deal. One of the great things about this channel, and why I love having it so much, is because we do listen to you and we respond. And so we're going to have a show here at 12 o'clock Eastern time, where Ted's going to come on and he's going to answer your questions. So tune back in there, and we will see you in about 20 minutes. See you then.